You call that a sniper? My dead uncle had better aim blindfolded. The alien laughed, slapping his knee as the live broadcast panned across his smug purple face. Across a dozen systems, trillions of beings watched as the Zarn Dominion's elite snipers roasted human tactics like a comedy show. A hologram of a retired Earth soldier in a rocking chair appeared behind them, holding a rifle backward. Send us that old fossil. What's his name? Coupe? Yeah, let's see if his bones can even lift a gun. The room of alien marksmen roared. But on a quiet ridge deep in Earth's northern mountains, far from war and noise, an old man paused mid-sip. The coffee in his cup trembled slightly as the ancient radio on his shelf echoed with static and mockery. He slowly turned, glanced at the trunk in the corner covered in dust and claw marks from a bear that once tried to eat it, and exhaled through his nose. Coupe didn't smile. He hadn't smiled since the last war. He placed the coffee down with the care of a surgeon and walked to the trunk, ignoring the creak in his knees and the dull ache in his back. It took a crowbar and a curse to pry it open. Inside lay the long case, sealed with faded red wax and a metal emblem that looked like a bullet slicing through wind. He opened it slowly, reverently. The sniper rifle inside gleamed like the day it was forged, still oiled, still perfect. Next to it a folder. Handwritten. Confirmed kills, 899. Coupe stared at the last line, which was blank. A single bullet sat beside it. He ran a hand over the cold metal and muttered only 3 words, the ones that once echoed through 1,000 battlefields. I don't miss. 10 hours later, the rusty shack he called home was covered in a blanket of mist and pine smoke. Coupe loaded gear into a concealed hatch beneath the floor, flipping switches that hadn't been touched in 20 years. A hum buzzed through the cabin. Hidden panels shifted. Walls hissed as decades of camouflage peeled back. A small, outdated stealth pod stood waiting underground, marked with a fading Earth Federation logo and a sticker that read, "You can run, but I can shoot faster." He climbed in with a grunt and a wince, settling into the pilot's seat like it was a familiar chair at a bar he hadn't visited in decades. He flicked a switch. The system beeped uncertainly. AI assist, offline. Manual mode engaged. This is probably a bad idea. Coupe snorted. He agreed. The pod launched silently, carving through the Earth's clouds and disappearing into the void like a ghost. The shack above sealed itself. The rocking chair still moved with the wind. Somewhere along the Martian belt, at a crowded outpost called Junkers Hollow, a group of smug aliens gathered around a rusted screen in a dirty bar. The same broadcast played again, the Zarn snipers pointing at Earth's old war footage, laughing at the slow movement and antique scopes. A blue-skinned bartender smirked. You'd think they'd shut up after what happened on Helix Prime. A cloaked figure sitting at the bar let out a quiet chuckle. What happened on Helix Prime? One of the drunk patrons asked. The bartender shrugged. 9 snipers went in. Only 1 bullet came out. Guess who fired it? The drunkard laughed and waved him off. Humans love their bedtime stories. The cloaked figure sipped his drink. When the bottle lowered, the bartender noticed the edge of an Earth military tattoo on his wrist. He went pale. Meanwhile, deep in Zarn-controlled space, the alien snipers trained at Tower Nexus 12, a floating fortress that orbited a molten moon. Commander Lurik, the top-ranked Zarn marksman, leaned back in his observation chair, a toothpick in his fanged mouth and an amused expression on his leathery face. Let them come, he muttered. We need fresh targets. The junior snipers around him howled with laughter, adjusting their rifles with too much pride and not enough caution. The room was lit with holograms showing failed Earth ambushes, each one labeled with mocking titles like Pebble Tossers and Boomer with a gun. They were arrogant, overconfident, and ready for nothing. Back in orbit, Coupe's pod coasted through asteroid fields, undetected. He avoided the main lanes, used dead comets for cover, and shut down all emissions. As the stars slid by, he pulled out a dog tag from his jacket. 2 names. His. And one that had been crossed out with a deep scratch. He didn't cry. He never had, even when she died. His spotter. His best friend. The one who called wind like it was gospel. He placed the tag back into his chest pocket, next to the bullet with her name carved into it. Bullet 900 wasn't just for revenge. It was a promise. The pod landed softly on an abandoned outpost buried inside a hollowed asteroid. The place smelled like old coolant and mold, but the sniping perch on the northern ridge was untouched. Dust still lay over the controls. The power core hummed back to life with a flicker. He set up the rifle, adjusted the analog scope, and aligned the wind meter manually. No AI. No drones. Just gut, instinct, and muscle memory so deeply burned in, it moved before he thought. He opened the map. Red marks bloomed like scars across it. The last known locations of every sniper who mocked him. Some were dead already. Others had gone underground. But a few still sent broadcasts. Especially Lyric. A new transmission buzzed through the comms. Lyric's voice again, smug and oozing confidence. To the Earth relic who thinks he can relive his glory days, save us the trouble and shoot yourself. We're laughing at your aim before we've even seen it. Coupe didn't flinch. He didn't get mad. He just adjusted his rifle. He found the range. He read the wind. And without ceremony he whispered, "Wind 2 knots cross left. Target elevation, 24 meters." The bullet fired. No lasers. No AI tracking. Just a single shot through vacuum and debris. 4 sectors away, a Zarn sniper dropped mid-sentence on a live stream. His head twisted oddly, his helmet crumpling inward as his broadcast died with him. Viewers watched in silence. Then the kill feed flickered. Unknown origin. Analog slug. Lethal. Coupe looked down at the paper list beside him. 8 names remained. 9 bullets in the belt. 1 extra, just in case. He scratched a line across the first name. The stars outside continued to turn slowly. Somewhere far away, laughter stopped. The outpost on the fringe of the Martian belt was a junkyard of broken satellites, rusted orbital scrap, and forgotten battleships. Coupe's pod hovered near the dark side of a shattered frigate, cloaked by debris and silence. He watched the outpost through a long-range scope, not for tactical reasons but out of habit. The place was loud even in space. Neon signs flickered above docking ports, cargo bots floated erratically, and aliens of all shapes and smells moved like ants in chaos. The outpost was called Cradle 9, a halfway hub for smugglers, washed-up mercs, and information brokers who didn't ask questions unless the payment was too low. Coupe didn't need questions. He needed one thing. A name. A location. The next sniper on the list. The last known place that idiot had broadcast from was a bar called the Dust Pipe. So that's where he went. The bar stank of melted circuits, sweat, and something that might have once been fish. Coupe stepped through the metal doorway and immediately drew attention. Not because he looked dangerous. Quite the opposite. He looked old. Worn boots, patched jacket, and a silver beard that wasn't trimmed so much as it gave up growing. A few alien patrons chuckled. One nudged his friend and whispered something in broken galactic basic about human fossils and walking corpses. Coupe ignored them and walked to the counter, leaning forward with a groan that could have come from his knees or his attitude. The bartender was a short creature with 3 eyes and a single finger. The eye in the middle glowed with a neon green tinge. Coupe dropped a chip on the counter, and the bartender scanned it. The readout pulsed once. Enough credits for information, drinks, and a possible punch in the teeth. The bartender pointed silently to a corner booth where a human sat alone, wearing a cloak that looked too clean for this place. Coupe didn't look back as he walked. He sat opposite the cloaked figure, and for a moment neither spoke. "You here to buy information or start another galactic legend?" the cloaked man finally asked, voice low. Coupe slid a folded piece of paper across the table. The man unfolded it, raised an eyebrow at the red markings, and smirked. "You're him. Thought you were dead." Coupe shrugged. "Working on it." The man chuckled. "You're looking for Sarvok, right? Last of the Dominion's trainee class. Hothead. Broadcasted from the Helix towers 2 rotations ago. Probably still there, thinking he's untouchable. Coupe nodded. He stood up, placed another chip on the table, then hesitated. Got any jerky? The man blinked, confused, then reached into a bag and tossed him a dried meat strip. Coupe caught it, stuffed it into his pocket, and walked out as if he had just asked for weather directions. Outside, the wind screamed across the metallic corridors of Cradle 9. Coupe made his way toward the transport hub, but a shout stopped him. A loud voice yelled across the square. Hey, Grandpa? You Coupe? Coupe turned slowly. A tall alien, armored, holding a pulse rifle and wearing a shirt that said Coupe is a bedtime story, stepped forward with 3 other soldiers. We saw your little stunt on the feeds. You think you're back? We've been laughing all day. Coupe tilted his head, unimpressed. I've got time for one insult. Make it count. The alien grinned. Your aim's like your age. Shaky. The laugh barely had time to echo before Coupe moved. Not with a gun. With a step. One boot twisted, kicked up dust, and the alien tripped over his own foot. Coupe used the distraction to slam a metal pipe into the second one's leg. The third fired, missed, hit the fourth. By the time security bots rolled in, Coupe had walked past the chaos, not a drop of sweat on him. He left them coughing, groaning, and thoroughly humiliated. A nearby vendor clapped. The legends still got it. The shuttle to Helix Towers was slow, old, and sounded like it could fall apart at any moment. Coupe didn't mind. He stared out the window at the stars, watching the familiar constellation he once used for wind calculation during sniper drills. The rifle lay beside him, wrapped in cloth and memory. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a tiny cube. Inside, holographic images flickered. Faces from the past. His squad. His spotter. Their last mission. He clicked it off quickly. He didn't need ghosts. Not now. The Helix Towers floated above a fractured moon. 3 spiral platforms rotating slowly in low orbit, connected by thin bridges and powered by solar beams. It was half training ground, half propaganda hub. The Zarn used it to record flashy videos of their snipers performing tricks. Fancy shots. Ricochets. Exploding targets. It was all for show. Sarvak had turned it into his personal circus. And that made him predictable. Coupe landed quietly on the rear service deck, where no lights functioned and cameras were broken long ago by a meteor storm. He moved like a shadow through the maintenance corridors, placing sensors and wind markers with each step. He knew the main tower would have a perfect perch. High elevation. Direct line of sight. And the fool would be there, talking to his followers. When he reached the access platform, he crawled to the edge, adjusted his scope, and found Sarvak laughing in the center of a circular stage, holding a custom sniper rifle with a glowing barrel. Coupe counted the guards. 3. All lazy. 1 smoking. 1 asleep. 1 dancing to music. Coupe shook his head. He adjusted the dials. Checked wind with a licked finger. Lined up the shot. Whispered to no one. Crosswind, 3 clicks left. Target, overconfident. Result, correction. The shot fired. Sarvak never finished his sentence. The bullet punched through the shoulder of his gun arm, then ricocheted off the metal railing to strike his leg. He collapsed screaming. Not dead. Just humiliated. The message was clear. Coupe could have killed him. He chose not to. The guards ran, and the camera feed went dark. Across the galaxy, the sniping boards exploded. Unknown shooter. Unknown angle. Confirmed analog. Message left behind, your next mistake will be fatal. Coupe didn't wait for applause. He packed the rifle, vanished through the duct system, and boarded an old cargo ship heading toward the asteroid belt. He didn't smile. But he did open the jerky and take a bite. His AI spotter Rags would have made a sarcastic comment about sodium levels. Coupe muttered to himself, only half joking. I miss Rags more than I miss sleep. He leaned back, closed one eye, and rested. The next target was in Sector 8. And the next bullet was already waiting. The cargo freighter smelled like rust, coolant, and desperation. Coupe sat in a dim corner of the hold, surrounded by crates marked with alien symbols and leaking gases that hissed like angry snakes. The ship groaned with every jump, its gravity stabilizers flickering just enough to make standing up an act of courage. He didn't mind. He had slept in worse. Trenches. Supply tunnels. The rib cage of a dead Leviathan during the Second Belt War. This was practically luxury by comparison. He stared at the datapad in his lap, zooming in on Sector 8. The next sniper on the list was stationed at a relay node deep inside the debris ring of a collapsed moon. The node had once been part of a joint observatory project between Earth and the Zarn, but after the treaties fell apart it became a pirate station and later a training site for experimental long-range tactics. Now it was in the hands of a Zarn prodigy named Kevlik. The feeds called him the Wind Prophet. Claimed he could shoot blindfolded by reading tremors in the atmosphere. Coupe had seen the footage. Trick shots, yes. Real war? No. But the kid was fast and arrogant, and that made him dangerous. The freighter docked without ceremony, bumping against a ragged space station that barely functioned. The pilot, a four-armed reptilian smuggler named Drix, didn't ask Coupe any questions. He simply took the credits and mumbled something about not staying long. Coupe disembarked quietly, gears slung across his back, and disappeared into the metallic labyrinth of the station's lower levels. Lights flickered. Steam vented from broken pipes. The walls vibrated with distant gunfire, either from a skirmish or someone losing badly at cards. He passed by a group of mercs arguing over a bet and stepped into an old lift shaft that still worked if you kicked it just right. It dragged him up through 10 levels of rusted platforms and finally opened into a control deck overrun with antenna arrays and old-world tech. This was where Rags had once lived, back when Earth still had a footprint here. Coupe moved through the room, brushing aside cobwebs and dust until he found the main console. He connected a cable from his wristband to the terminal and waited. The screen flickered and then displayed a familiar boot menu, something no alien would recognize. Rags had been an experimental AI spotter built into Earth's sniper squads late in the war. Most were decommissioned, deemed too unpredictable. Rags had been sarcastic, glitchy, and prone to mood swings. But Coupe trusted him more than any general. He typed a few commands, watched the drive spin up, and then a flickering voice broke through the static. "I knew you couldn't stay retired." Coupe raised an eyebrow. "You're alive." "Half alive. Mostly corrupted. But enough of me still here to call wind and yell at you." Coupe actually chuckled. It felt strange in his throat. He hadn't laughed in weeks. He downloaded Rag's core into a portable module and snapped it onto his scope housing. The old AI buzzed once, then hissed like it was sneezing. "This rifle smells like pine tar and loneliness." Coupe replied without emotion. "You're not wrong." He moved back into the shaft and climbed to the exterior of the station, magnet boots clanking softly on the hull. The debris ring was visible now. Chunks of moonstone and metal floated in predictable orbit. Somewhere in that mess, Kevlik had set up a mobile sniping unit, complete with a rotating perch that spun every few minutes to throw off radar pings. Coupe studied the pattern. Rags spoke up. "He's good. Not great. But his gear's fresh. He's running predictive echolocators and rail-thin grav compensators." Coupe adjusted his scope. "We beat better with worse." The AI paused. "I miss Juno." Coupe didn't reply. The silence between them said enough. He found a high-angle trajectory path that would allow for a timed shot once the perch rotated back into alignment. It would only be exposed for 5 seconds every 2 minutes. Rags calculated wind drag, microgravity interference, and spin rotation. Coupe adjusted the rifle manually. They waited. The silence stretched out. Rags broke it with a whisper. "You sure you want to humiliate him instead of kill him?" Coupe exhaled slowly. "He's still a kid. Maybe he learns something." The perch came into view. Kevlik stood there, recording himself again. Probably another training stream. Coupe didn't hate him. He hated what he was becoming. He fired. The bullet flew in silence, passing through a narrow beam of redirected sunlight and hitting the target's scope housing mid-frame. The impact sent the rifle spinning from Kevlik's hands, which was followed by a shout and a scramble for balance as his perch rotated off-axis from the shock. Coupe watched as Kevlik grabbed a rail and cursed loudly into the void. The kid didn't die. But he would think twice about streaming again. Rags muttered in amusement. That was cruel. Coupe shrugged. The galaxy needs a little less ego. He packed up, moved off the hull, and slipped back into the station before alarms could ping him. By the time the news broke about the mysterious shot, Coupe had already booked passage on another smuggler's ship heading toward the edge of Dominion-controlled territory. 2 names remained on the priority list. One was a former Zarn sniper turned bounty hunter. The other was Lurik himself. Coupe knew he couldn't just snipe the commander. The Zarn would be expecting that. They'd scan for analogs, post decoys, use illusions. Lurik was careful, always hidden behind layers of tech and bodyguards. Coupe would need something better than a rifle. He'd need a message. Something poetic. Rags pinged. I've got an idea. Coupe waited. We hit their comm tower. Shut down their feeds. Take away the thing they love most. The attention. Coupe stared out the porthole at the shifting stars. You think they'll come looking for me? They already are. One more shot, co-op. One more and it's done. Coupe leaned back in the seat, the rifle beside him, Rags buzzing quietly like a heartbeat. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself. I don't miss. I never did. And I never will. The bounty hunter's trail was cold and scattered across 5 systems. Coupe followed it through scorched outposts and silent moons where only the dead remembered what war had tasted like. The target's name was Varn Kess, a Zarn sniper who had gone rogue after the Dominion cut him loose. He had been on the same unit as Lurik once, trained under the same doctrine, but with twice the cruelty and none of the charisma. Now he hunted for credits and left bodies behind like cigarette butts. According to a black market contact, Kess had taken a contract to guard a Dominion weapons convoy moving through the dead zone between sectors. It was a no-man's land full of magnetic storms and asteroid mines, perfect for someone who liked to kill without witnesses. Coupe had no intention of sneaking past. He wanted Kess to know he was coming. He landed on a cratered moon littered with broken towers and machine carcasses from an old mining operation. Rags pinged almost immediately, warning of active infrared pulses on the far ridge. Kess was nearby, probably already watching. Coupe crouched low, set up his scope behind a pile of collapsed machinery, and scanned the landscape. He didn't see movement, but he felt it. That low thrum under his skin, like an itch before a bullet hits. Rags whispered from the rifle. He's tracking you. He's good. He's waiting for you to move first. Coupe didn't blink. He moved a small decoy drone into position, shaped like a crawling repair unit, and sent it into the open. It didn't get far before a rail slug punched through it with surgical precision, sending sparks and fragments into the air. Coupe followed the trajectory backward. He found it. A faint shimmer along a rock wall, barely visible. Kess was using heat camouflage, blending into the stone perfectly. Rags spat numbers. Wind 0.4. Distance 1100 meters. No line of sight from here unless you get elevation. Coupe slid backward, careful not to leave tracks. He moved around the wreckage, climbing a rusted scaffold that swayed under his weight. Each step felt like it could be his last. The joints in his knees creaked louder than the metal. At the top, he found a vantage point with partial cover and a narrow slice of visibility on the ridge. He adjusted the scope, realigned the dials, and waited. The shimmer moved slightly. Kess had seen the climb. He was repositioning. Coupe whispered to Rags. Do it. The AI activated a frequency pulse that overloaded nearby comms, creating white noise across the local net. Kess would now hear static in his helmet, unable to track Coupe's position by sound. It was a small edge, but in sniper duels, small edges killed legends. Coupe exhaled and fired. The bullet clipped the rock near Kess's head, throwing dust into the air and forcing him to move. A second shot followed, not to kill but to force him into the open. Kess dove to the left, rolled into a hollow, and popped up to fire back. The slug barely missed Coupe's shoulder. Another zipped past his hip. He dropped, rolled, and fired blind. The shot struck metal, sparking a small explosion that sent shrapnel in every direction. Then silence. Rags crackled. "I think you got his scope." Coupe moved again, circling wide and fast, ducking low under a collapsed beam. He saw a trail of green blood leading toward a broken shipping crate. Kess had taken cover inside. Coupe approached slowly, rifle raised. He could hear labored breathing. Then a voice, raw and bitter. "You're better than the stories say." Coupe stepped closer. "You were sloppy. Should have changed elevation faster." Kess coughed, something wet and painful. "You here to kill me or make a speech?" Coupe didn't answer. He lowered the rifle slightly. "You used to serve with Lyric. You know where he hides." Kess laughed, a sharp crack of sound that turned into a wheeze. "You think I'd betray him for free?" Coupe pulled a bullet from his belt. He tossed it at Kess, who caught it with a shaky hand. The side was etched with a name. Not Kess's. Lyric's. "I'm not asking you to betray him. I'm giving you a warning. Stay out of the way." Kess stared at the bullet, then tossed it back. "I was never in the way. I just wanted to prove I was better than him. You win. I'm done." Coupe turned and walked away, leaving the crate and the broken man behind. By the time he reached his ship, a message was waiting. A static-laced file from an unknown source. Rags decrypted it. It was a location. A Dominion relay base on a hollowed-out planetoid, hidden beneath layers of jamming signals and defense grids. Lyric's last known hideout. He was broadcasting from there, building hype for what he called the final mockery. A contest between snipers. A public duel. Coupe versus Lyric. To be streamed across the galaxy. Rags groaned. "He's setting a trap." Coupe didn't care. "I've walked into worse." The ship lifted off, cutting through black clouds of magnetic dust, and vanished into the stars. 3 hours later, the Dominion broadcast lit up again. Lyric appeared on screen, wearing ceremonial armor with sniper symbols engraved along the shoulders. His voice echoed through a million feeds. "The human relic has answered the call. He approaches. Let us end this farce once and for all." Behind him stood 2 decoy snipers and a firing line of drones. Coupe would be walking into a death corridor. Rags beeped. "We're gonna need a plan." Coupe gripped the rifle and opened a small case he had kept sealed until now. Inside was a secondary module for Rags, one they never used during the war. It activated a self-guided reverse bounce shot using reflective markers and terrain geometry. It had never been tested in real combat. Coupe looked at it and nodded. Time to finish this. The relay base floated silently beneath a cratered sky, its outer walls coated in solar dust and tracking lasers. Coupe moved through the blind spots, laying reflectors at precise angles along the ridge and rock walls. Rags calculated the trajectory 3 times, each one riskier than the last. The drones were scanning but hadn't picked up the analog movements. The wind was minimal. The silence was pure. He lined up the shot, breathing slow. Lyric was still talking, boasting about the weakness of human tactics and the superiority of Dominion optics. Coupe didn't hear any of it. All he heard was his own heartbeat. Rags gave the final calculation. Now. The bullet left the barrel and curved through the air, bouncing off a reflective shield embedded in a collapsed antenna. It changed course, hitting another marker on a rusted fuel tank, then rebounded a final time off a tilted solar panel. It struck Lyric between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae, dropping him instantly. The broadcast cut out mid-sentence. Across the galaxy, silence fell like ash. Then the feeds blinked once more, displaying a single message written in human script. "I don't miss." The silence that followed Lyric's death rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. No announcement. No tribute. No retaliation. The broadcast ended, the feeds cut to black, and the stars just kept spinning. In the aftermath, something strange happened. Instead of the usual chaos or threats of revenge, there was stillness. The Dominion command went quiet, not from fear, but confusion. Their greatest sniper had been eliminated in the middle of a live broadcast, in a duel he had crafted to embarrass Earth. And not by an army or drone swarm, but by one old man with a worn rifle and a name half the galaxy had thought was a myth. Coupe didn't wait for applause or for Dominion scouts to start hunting. He vanished again, back into the asteroid trails and fractured moons where comms failed and sensors lied. The AI rags said nothing for hours. Neither did Co-op. There wasn't much left to say. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. Coupe had marked his final shot on the paper list. 900. But the rifle didn't feel lighter. The air didn't taste different. The memories hadn't faded. If anything, they sharpened. As he drifted through a dead orbital station to avoid scanners, he stared at an old photo of his squad taken before the Battle of Vale Crater. They had been smiling, dirt-streaked and exhausted, arms around each other. Juno stood just behind him, hands on her hips, the eternal look of someone who had already planned 3 exits and 2 backup strategies. She had been more than a spotter. She had been the only one who ever saw through his silences. Rags flickered. You know it's not over. Coupe looked up. No. Now they come for me. The Dominion might have lost their pride, but they hadn't lost their teeth. Within a day of Lurik's death, a patrol fleet was dispatched. Not an invasion force. Not a missile barrage. A surgical team. Silent drop units. No broadcasts. No signatures. Just a quiet kill order. Coupe intercepted the signal while scanning a merchant relay station for fuel. The transmission was brief. No name. Just an order: eliminate the human sniper by any means necessary. Rags read it aloud without emotion. 10 units. 6 confirmed snipers. 4 heavy gunners. Full cloaks. No identifiers. Coupe leaned back in his seat unbothered. So they're sending the cleanup crew. Rags buzzed faintly. You planning to run? Coupe shook his head. Not this time. He set course for the dust fields, an abandoned training ground buried deep in the rings of a forgotten gas giant. It was where Earth snipers used to train before the war ended, a place of shifting terrain, extreme wind tunnels, and zero atmospheric stability. Nobody went there now. Too unstable. Too unpredictable. Perfect. Coupe landed at the edge of the canyons, the wind already howling like a wounded beast. He unpacked his rifle and set up 3 dummy positions along the ridge. Rags handled the echo drones, simulating heat and noise to confuse enemy sensors. The real nest was buried under a collapsed observation tower, shielded by metal plates and half a dozen improvised camouflage nets. Coupe dug in. And then he waited. They came at dusk, or whatever counted for dusk in a place with 3 suns and no clear sky. No ships. No footprints. Just shadows. They moved like ghosts, slipping between rock and storm. Rags tracked them in bursts, unable to hold a lock. They're good. Trained for your kind. Coupe didn't respond. He adjusted the scope, watched the dust swirl, and breathed with it. The first one made the mistake of scanning the wrong dummy. Coupe's shot went through his shoulder before the man could blink. The second stepped on a vibration plate hidden beneath the rocks. A delayed mine took out his legs. The third fired from behind a ridge, grazing Coupe's arm. That one got close. Close enough to make him remember pain. Coupe rolled, bit down on the sting, and returned fire with a bounce shot that clipped the enemy through a reflection panel. The rest spread out, shifting formation. They had stopped underestimating him. The next hour became a brutal, slow-moving hunt. Not a firefight. A chess match. One side used drones and scanners. The other used wind and instinct. Rags whispered updates between power flickers. 4 left. Then 3. Then 1. The last came quietly, avoiding drones, hugging wind currents, and nearly getting to the nest. Coupe let him approach, waited until the glint of his scope crossed the wrong reflection. Then he whispered wind call. 3 clicks right. 2 down. Fire. The bullet caught the last sniper mid-step. He dropped silently. When it ended, Coupe sat back, hands trembling slightly. He wasn't sure if it was adrenaline or age. Rags buzzed again. All clear. For now. Coupe wiped the blood from his sleeve and bandaged the graze. He wasn't immortal. He wasn't invincible. But today he was enough. He powered down the drones, collected what he could from the fallen, and buried their weapons beneath rocks. No trophies. No statements. Just silence. That night, if it could be called a night, he sat by a small thermal fire and ate old jerky while the wind screamed overhead. Rags pinged softly. You know what's next. Coupe nodded. The Dominion will replace Lyric. Maybe not today. But soon. And when they do, they'll make a show out of it. Some new legend. Some new name. Rags waited a moment. So what will you do? Coupe looked at the rifle. At the cracked scope. At the boots that had walked through too many wars. He didn't answer. But he reached into his pack and pulled out an old transmission device. It was ancient by modern standards. But it worked. He powered it up and sent a single burst through the void. A call. A challenge. Not to the Dominion. But to Earth. To anyone still watching. To the rookies who thought war was drones and kill feeds. He sent out coordinates. A location deep in the belt. An old training field. No speech. No speech. No speech. Just a line of text. Sniper school. 1 week. Bring your rifle. If you miss, don't come back. Rags blinked. You're serious. Coupe stared at the stars. The Dominion doesn't need another Lyric. But Earth might need another me. He leaned back against a rock, closed his eyes, and rested. For now. The galaxy was too quiet. And in the quiet, something always got stupid. He'd be waiting. The field looked nothing like it had during the war. The rusted towers were now leaning at strange angles, buried partially beneath shifting sands blown in by decades of forgotten storms. Old target markers stood riddled with holes, some still bearing the initials of long-dead soldiers. The main outpost had collapsed entirely, and the control platform was now home to nesting birds with feathers like shimmering glass. But the sniping ridgeline remained, jagged and quiet, and Coupe stood atop it once more, watching the horizon like it might suddenly decide to speak. Below him, scattered across the cracked earth and between the remains of shattered bunkers, were the ones who had answered his call. Some were barely out of their teens, wearing gear that didn't match and helmets that looked too big. Others were ex-soldiers, tired but stubborn, carrying antique rifles or homemade scopes. They hadn't come for fame. They had come because something inside them was still unfinished. He didn't ask their names. He didn't give a speech. He pointed toward the valley, toward the wind, and told them to find a target and learn how to hear it breathe. For the next 5 days, the silence of the valley was broken only by the snap of rifle fire and the distant whistle of wind across broken steel. Coupe moved like a ghost between them, offering no praise, only correction. Too slow. You're reading the wind, not smelling it. That scope's lying to you. Do it again. He didn't teach them like a soldier. He taught them like someone who had made peace with the cost of precision. Rags provided support, limited but sharp, occasionally speaking through cracked speakers on Coupe's belt. Mostly taunts. You gonna cry because you missed a shot? My last operator hit a target blind through a sandstorm. And once, to one trainee with a shaky hand and eyes full of doubt, Rags whispered softly, you can't miss if you shoot with purpose. One evening, as the stars bled violet across the sky and the old solar panels buzzed faintly with life, a trainee approached Coupe with hesitation. She was young, barely 20, but carried herself like someone who had been broken once and refused to stay that way. She asked why he had come back. Not why he fought or why he killed, but why he returned to teach. Coupe didn't look at her when he answered. Because too many people believe war is won with noise. I came to show them that it's the quiet that decides everything. She didn't understand at first. Most didn't. But they stayed anyway. On the sixth morning, a low pulse rattled the valley. It came from orbit, a Dominion signal burst so wide it shook the broken antenna towers and sent several trainees ducking for cover. Rags decoded it in seconds. They're not done. They sent someone new. No name. Just a call sign. The Warden. Built different. A mix of organic and machine. Full visual overlay, no heart rate. Dominion's new poster sniper. Coupe didn't blink. How long? Rags responded immediately. 4 hours till drop. Coming straight here. For you. The trainees panicked. Some suggested evacuation. Others wanted to hide. But Coupe stood still and looked to the sky like he had already seen the outcome. He gathered them quickly and pointed to the ridgeline where he'd first stood decades ago. All of you take cover there. Watch. Learn. If I don't come back, make sure no one else dies not knowing how to shoot. One of them stepped forward, her voice shaking. You're going alone. Coupe nodded. I always was. He moved to the center of the valley and took position at the oldest sniper nest, a half-sunken platform now covered in rust and scorched markings. He unpacked the rifle, cleaned the barrel, and whispered wind numbers to himself even though the air was still. Rags chirped. You really think he'll come down in the open? Coupe didn't answer. He just checked the scope and waited. Minutes passed like hours until the air above shimmered. A crack of light broke across the sky, and then a figure descended. Not in a ship. Not in armor. Just a being wrapped in heat and metal, half human in shape but with no real features. The Warden landed quietly, weapon in hand, scanning in every direction with movement as smooth as fluid. They stared at each other across the valley, two shadows divided by time. The Warden raised a hand, 2 fingers up. Challenge. Old sniper code. 1 shot. 1 outcome. Coupe nodded. He set the rifle down, adjusted the bipod, and whispered a wind call. Rags buzzed. He's fast. Faster than Lyric. Coupe didn't care. He'd already made the shot. Not with the rifle. But with everything before it. The setup. The terrain. The angle. He had studied the wind here longer than most had been alive. The Warden fired first. A straight shot, too perfect, too clean. Coupe had already moved. The bullet missed by an inch. Coupe didn't fire back right away. He repositioned. Changed height. Adjusted angle. Then exhaled. The shot echoed through the valley and struck the Warden square in the joint beneath its left eye. The alloy faceplate shattered, and the body crumpled like a sack of wet wires. The silence that followed was not fear. It was reverence. The trainees watched as Coupe stood slowly, slung the rifle over his shoulder, and walked back without a word. He passed them without stopping, nodding once toward the girl who had asked why he returned. Now she understood. That night they sat around a fire built from broken targeting drones. No stories. No boasts. Just crackling heat and the stars above. Rags spoke once more. 901. Coupe shook his head. That wasn't for the list. That one was for the silence. In the morning, he packed his rifle, left behind a manual he had written in fragments over the years, and pointed toward a dry cave near the west ridge. That's your new nest. Train there. Listen to the dust. When you're ready, leave something behind for the next one. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked into the wind and vanished like a shot that had already landed. Long after he was gone, legends would grow. About a man who never missed. About the valley where silence spoke louder than any war cry. But for those who stood there with him, who watched the Warden fall, it wasn't a legend. It was a lesson. War ends not with noise but with a whisper. And sometimes that whisper sounds exactly like a rifle bolt sliding home.